The sun sank low over Rustwood, casting golden streaks across the wooden fences and dust-speckled fields. It should have been a perfect afternoon. A quiet one, peaceful even. Ava Whitaker sat cross-legged on the back porch of her house, a sketchbook resting on her knees. She moved her pencil carefully across the page, sketching the outline of a horse beneath a big cottonwood tree, her favorite place to draw. Out in the yard, Blaze grazed lazily in the fading light. His chestnut-red coat shimmered, catching the last of the day's warmth. His ears flicked at the sound of wind or a distant squirrel, but his eyes never strayed far from the girl. Always watching. Always guarding. He wasn't just a horse. He was her last connection to the person who mattered most. Her mom had named him Blaze, after the way his mane looked like fire in the morning sun. That was before the cancer took her, before the hospital smells replaced home-cooked dinners, before the house turned quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful anymore. Her dad, Thomas, had been different since, present in body, absent in every other way. Work swallowed him. He left before Ava got up and came home long after she went to bed. Sometimes she'd find takeout containers stacked on the counter, a sign he'd remembered to eat even if he didn't remember to talk. But Blaze? Blaze never forgot. Never wandered too far. Never looked away when she needed him most. She was drawing his eyes when it started. A sound, sharp, sneering, cut through the fence line. "Nice pony, freak." Ava looked up, startled. 3 boys stood near the gate, all older than her by at least a few years. She recognized them, sons of the town's wealthier families, the kind who wore confidence like armor and trouble like perfume. They didn't wait for permission. One kicked the gate until the latch snapped open. Another grabbed a stone from the garden bed and lobbed it toward Blaze. "Let's see if he can still run like a wild Mustang," the tallest one sneered, gripping a metal rod he'd swiped from the nearby irrigation pipe. Blaze reared slightly but didn't bolt. Instead, he stepped in front of Ava, placing his large frame between her and the boys. His muscles tensed, his ears pinned back. "Go inside," one of them barked at Ava. "Unless you want to get hurt too." Ava stood frozen, too stunned to scream. Her legs refused to move. The first blow landed with a sickening clang. Blaze grunted but stood his ground. Another blow struck his flank, then another. Ava shrieked, high, raw, panicked. "Stop!" she cried. "Please, stop! He's not doing anything!" She ran toward them, fists pounding uselessly against the closest boy's arm. He shoved her hard to the ground. Her knees scraped against the dry dirt. Still she screamed, "Help! Someone help us!" Windows stayed shut. Curtains twitched, then closed. A woman across the street glanced through her blinds, then turned away. The boys laughed, loud and careless. One raised the rod again, but Blaze's legs buckled beneath him before it fell. He hit the ground hard. Dust billowed. His breath came shallow and broken. Ava scrambled to him, clutching his neck. Blood seeped from a gash near his shoulder. His side rose once, then again. Barely. "Please," she whispered, pressing her face into his mane. "Please stay. Please don't go." The boys backed away, maybe spooked by the look in her eyes, maybe just bored. One dropped the rod with a dull clatter. They slipped back over the fence like shadows melting into dusk. The world went quiet, except for one voice. "Is he breathing?" Ava jerked her head up. The voice came from the fence line, rough and uncertain but steady. "Is the horse alive?" A man stood there. Weathered, tall, wearing grease-stained jeans and a faded navy t-shirt. His gray beard framed a hard jaw, his eyes narrowing with the kind of sharpness that came from a different kind of battlefield. He didn't wait for an answer. He moved fast, scaling the fence with surprising ease for a man his age. He knelt beside Blaze and checked the horse's pulse with practiced hands. Then he turned to Ava. "We need to move him now." Ava didn't speak. She just nodded through her tears. He scooped her up with one arm and carried her like she weighed nothing. She didn't even realize how tightly she was holding onto Blaze's lead rope until they were halfway across the yard. A dented pickup sat in the alley behind the man's property, hitched to an old livestock trailer. He moved like a soldier, efficient, focused. By the time he helped Ava into the cab, Blaze was groaning in the trailer, barely upright. The man slid behind the wheel. "Name's Carter," he said, starting the engine. "Carter Briggs. You hang in there, kid. He's not gone yet." They didn't speak as the truck rumbled down the gravel road toward Sierra Creek Equine Hospital. Ava held Blaze's halter tight in her lap, blood staining her palms, dust clinging to her knees. Her voice had vanished, her throat raw from screaming, but she didn't cry now. She just stared forward, hollow. No one had come. Not her father, not the neighbors, not the town, but one man had. And even though her whole world felt like it was breaking in half, that mattered. It mattered more than anything. The fluorescent lights at Sierra Creek Equine Hospital cast long shadows over the gravel lot as Carter Briggs brought his truck to a stop. In the passenger seat, Ava sat motionless. Blaze's bloodied lead rope wrapped tightly around her small wrist, like it was keeping her from drifting away. Carter stepped out and opened her door. "You can stay or come with me," he said gently. "But he'd want you close." She didn't answer, just followed, slow and stiff. Her shirt was torn at the collar, her knees scraped raw. She looked less like a child and more like a shell with nothing left inside. Carter lowered the trailer ramp and shouted toward the building, "Need help out here, emergency." 2 vet techs came running, their eyes going wide at the sight. Blaze lay crumpled, his flank soaked in blood. Behind them came a woman in scrubs, sleeves rolled up, stethoscope already around her neck. Dr. Sierra Dawson, cool-headed and fast. "What happened?" she snapped. 3 boys, Carter replied. "Pipes, flank and right leg." Dr. Dawson didn't flinch. "Get the sling. Let's move, now." Carter crouched beside Ava. "You got him here, that matters." A nurse knelt beside the girl. "Is this your horse, sweetheart?" Ava blinked, her voice dry as paper. "He's my family." Dr. Dawson paused, then nodded. "We'll take good care of him." They wheeled Blaze inside, his eyes barely open. The mechanical sling lifted him slowly, like he might fall apart if anyone moved too fast. The double doors swung shut behind him. Ava stared at them long after they'd closed. Carter gently placed a hand on her back and guided her inside. The waiting room was too bright, the chairs too soft. Posters of galloping horses felt like lies. Carter grabbed a bottle of water from a vending machine and set it in front of her. "You don't have to talk," he said. "But if you want to, I'm here." She didn't move. Time passed slowly, thick with silence. Then a tech returned. "He's stable. Fractured leg, some internal bleeding. He's sedated. The next 24 hours are critical." Ava rose without speaking. Inside the recovery stall, Blaze lay blanketed, tubes trailing from his side. His chest rose and fell, each breath a small miracle. Ava knelt by his head and placed her hand on his cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. Carter watched from the doorway, arms crossed tight. He'd seen soldiers in field tents with the same look she had now, wide-eyed, hollowed out, holding on with everything left. When they left the hospital, Ava didn't ask to go home. Carter didn't ask why. He opened the door to his truck and said, "Let's go." His cabin sat at the edge of Rustwood, nestled between cottonwoods. The porch creaked, the paint peeled, but it was warm. Inside, tools hung on the walls, A couch sagged in the middle. The kitchen smelled faintly of peppermint and motor oil. Carter grilled sandwiches. Ava ate half of one. She sat at the table with Blaze's halter in her lap, tracing her fingers over the worn leather. He showed her the guest room. She didn't speak, just walked in and sat on the bed. He left the door cracked open. Later, Carter sat on the porch with a chipped mug of coffee, staring into the dark. He thought of Sadie, his daughter. Gone too fast, too far. Some regrets stained deeper than blood. But not this time. This time, he heard the scream, and he ran. The next morning, Carter drove Ava to school. She stepped out of the truck, backpack slung low, then turned and said softly, "Thank you." 2 words, but they carried weight. At school, the whispers started again. Kids stared. One boy muttered that Blaze had it coming. Another laughed like hurting an animal was a joke. The 3 boys strutted through the hallway as if nothing had happened. Their fathers ran town committees. Their families owned the land. And Ava, quiet, strange, different, was easy to ignore. No one asked how she was. No teacher pulled her aside. That afternoon, Carter picked her up. She handed him a drawing. Blaze under a cottonwood tree, leg bandaged, Ava curled beside him. At home, he led her to the garage. "I thought we could build something," he said, "for Blaze, for when he comes home." She looked up at him. A stall, just for him, strong. She nodded. He handed her a pair of gloves, too big, but she slid them on. They got to work. Quiet at first. Carter taught her to hammer without splitting the wood. She showed him how to sketch tiny horses in the corners of the boards. Each evening, the stall rose higher. Each evening, Ava said a little more. She asked about tools, about Blaze's chances, about how Carter knew so much about first aid. He told her about Sadie. She told him about her mom's garden, and how Blaze used to chase butterflies like he thought they were meant for him. One night, she asked, "Do horses remember pain?" Carter hesitated. "Yeah," he said, "but they remember kindness longer." She didn't say anything, but she smiled. It wasn't big, it wasn't loud, but it was real. By the end of the week, the stall stood finished, rough, sturdy, solid, a place waiting. A promise made of wood and quiet hands. What neither of them knew was that beyond Rustwood, the world had started to stir. A spark had caught, and the scream no one answered was about to be heard. The photo went online at 8:12 p.m. It showed Blaze lying in his recovery stall, his head cradled gently in Ava's lap. Her hand rested on his nose. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't posing. She was just there, still, quiet, real. Carter had taken it without her knowing. He hadn't planned to post it, but something inside him said the world nodded to see it. He wrote one sentence beneath the image. This horse didn't just take the beating for a child, he carried a town's silence on his back. By morning, it had been shared over 20,000 times. At first, Ava didn't know. She was too busy making sure Blaze's water was fresh, that his hay was fluffed just right, that the little lavender sachet her mom had sewn still hung by his stall door, the one that used to hang above her own bed. But Carter knew. His phone buzzed nonstop. Local news, national blogs, animal rights groups, all asking, who was the girl? Who were the boys? And how had no one stopped them? The town of Rustwood, built on generations of pride and tight-lipped tradition, began to feel the heat of 1,000 eyes. By lunch, news vans parked across from City Hall. That afternoon, Ava walked into the kitchen to find Carter sitting at the table, phone to his ear. He handed it to her. "It's the news, only if you want." She hesitated, then shook her head. Instead, she walked out to the porch, sat on the steps, and watched the cottonwoods sway in the breeze. That was when she noticed something strange. Across the street, her neighbor's curtains weren't closed. The woman was standing there, watching. Not hiding. People were watching now. Later that day, Carter pulled up the video. Someone, an anonymous neighbor, had turned in security footage from their doorbell camera. It showed the boys climbing the fence, showed them swinging, showed Ava screaming. There was no mistaking the cruelty. The video leaked. It spread faster than any of them expected. The school board, which had until then remained silent, held an emergency meeting. They issued a statement. "We take all allegations seriously." But it was too late. The footage said everything their words tried to bury. That night, Ava sat on the floor by Blaze's stall, her sketchbook in her lap. She drew slowly, lines careful, deliberate. A horse standing tall, shadows falling away behind it. Carter sat nearby, cross-legged, reading the comments aloud. From Portland, "This girl has more courage than half our politicians." From Texas, "Tell her Blaze has a fan club now." Ava didn't respond, but she kept drawing. One comment stopped Carter cold. They didn't just beat a horse. They tried to erase a child's voice. He looked over at Ava, her brow furrowed in concentration, and felt a slow, painful tightness in his chest. That was exactly what it was. The next day, a woman walked into the school and asked to speak with the principal. Her name was Miss Bellamy, and she taught 4th grade, though not Ava's class. She said she'd seen things. Said she'd reported one of the boys before for cornering a 1st grader near the bike racks. Nothing had been done. "I was told boys will be boys," she said. "But this is blood on all of us." Her words made it into the next day's paper. Then other stories emerged, from parents, former students, kids who'd been shoved, humiliated, silenced. The pattern was undeniable. The school board couldn't hide it anymore. Carter sat Ava down that evening. He told her what was happening, about the investigation, about how the town was being forced to listen. She said nothing for a long time, then asked, "Will they still be at school tomorrow?" "Yes," he said honestly. She nodded. "Okay." He waited. "Do you want to talk to someone? A counselor, maybe?" "I'd rather talk to Blaze." He couldn't argue with that. 2 days later, Dr. Dawson met them at the hospital gate with a small smile. "He stood on his own today," she said. "Only for a few seconds, but he did it." Ava didn't smile back. Her eyes just welled up as she whispered, "He's trying." The nurse handed her a letter that had come to the clinic, written in careful, wobbly handwriting. "To Ava. I'm sorry, I didn't stop them. I was there. I was scared. I should have helped." There was no signature. She folded the letter and slid it into her pocket. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. That afternoon, Carter caught her outside, hammering an extra nail into the stall frame. She was humming. A soft tune, the same one she used to whistle to Blaze when he was a foal. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," she said. Then she paused, stared off toward the edge of the field. "But I'm not finished." "Not finished with what?" "Letting people pretend they didn't hear me." She turned and walked back inside. That night, Ava asked Carter to help her write something. Not a post, not a caption, a letter. To the kids who watched. To the grown-ups who turned away. To the town that closed its eyes. And at the end, she signed it. Ava Whitaker, 9, Blaze's girl. Carter mailed it the next morning. And by the end of that week, it was printed on the front page of the Rustwood Gazette. The first time Blaze stood without support, the entire stall went still. Ava was the only one who saw it. No nurses, no cameras, no reporters, just her, sitting cross-legged near his hooves with a sketch pad resting on her knees. She had drawn the stall again, but this time with its door open and Blaze stepping into sunlight. He shifted slowly, muscles twitching beneath scarred skin, his breathing short but steady. His right leg trembled, lifted slightly, then found its balance. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he stood. Ava didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just reached out and touched his shoulder, and in that moment, the world got quiet enough to feel like hope. By the end of the week, Blaze was cleared to come home. Dr. Dawson helped load him gently into Carter's trailer. The drive back to the cabin was silent, the kind of silence that comes after a long storm. Ava sat beside him in the truck bed, one hand on his flank the whole way. When they pulled into the driveway, the sun broke through the clouds. The stall stood waiting, just like they left it, strong, simple, built with care and grief and all the words Ava never said aloud. She led Blaze down the ramp herself. He stepped slowly, gingerly but with purpose. His eyes scanned the familiar yard, the fence line, the tree where he used to nap under Ava's watch. Then he turned toward the stall, as if he knew it had been made just for him. Ava opened the gate. He walked in, and the world exhaled. The next morning, the Rustwood community gathered for the first time since the video went viral. A town hall meeting was held in the gym of the local middle school. Folding chairs packed the space. No podium, no big screens, just people. Ava sat in the back with Carter beside her. Blaze stayed outside, tethered quietly under a sycamore tree, his bandaged leg wrapped in fresh gauze. He waited like he always had, calm, still, unshaken. The mayor took the floor, cleared his throat, and began the same way politicians always did, with thanks, acknowledgments, a few lines about healing and community values. But the room didn't shift until he said the boys' names. For the first time, they weren't hidden behind initials or lawyer-approved statements. They were named. And then, finally, so was Ava. She didn't flinch. She stood, walked forward, and accepted the microphone that someone offered her with both hands. Her palms were shaking. Her knees wobbled. The lights were too bright. But she looked straight ahead. "I didn't think anyone would help," she began, and no one did. At first, the room was so quiet that the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the air like wind in an open field. "I screamed for someone to come," Ava continued. "But the only one who did was Blaze. He stood in front of me when no one else would." She paused. Her eyes found Carter in the crowd, then the nurse from the hospital, Miss Bellamy, and the stranger who'd left a candle at their fence line. "He didn't just protect me from them. He saved me from disappearing." She looked down at the microphone in her hands, then back up at the crowd. "And now I'm not afraid to speak, because if I don't, who will?" No applause, not at first, just silence, the kind that settles in your chest and changes you. Then, slowly, people rose to their feet, not to clap, but to acknowledge, one by one, until the entire room stood. Not a single person remained seated, not one. Outside, Ava walked toward the tree where Blaze stood waiting. As she reached him, he lowered his head to nuzzle her arm, the way he used to when he wanted her attention. Carter approached with a folded piece of paper in his hand. "They're being removed from school," he said gently, "placed into a restorative justice program, and their families issued a public apology." Ava shook her head. "I don't want their apology." "You don't have to take it," he said. "It wasn't meant for you, it was meant for the press." She nodded once. "Some things can't be undone." Then she turned to Blaze and whispered, "But I won't carry their silence anymore." That night, Carter sat on the porch while Ava brushed Blaze beside the barn. The stars came out one by one. The night was cool and still, and for the first time in weeks it didn't feel heavy. "Carter," Ava called softly. Yeah? Do you think he knows? Knows what? That he saved me. Carter took a breath, looked out at the stars and said, I think he knew the moment he stepped in front of you. And I think he's been trying to keep you safe ever since. She didn't reply. Just leaned into Blaze's side and rested her head against his shoulder. Inside the barn, the stall glowed warm under a single bulb. The scent of hay and cedar and healing filled the air. For the first time in a long time, Ava didn't feel small. She felt seen, she felt safe. And the town of Rustwood, once so quick to look away, had no choice now but to face the truth she had carried all along. Spring came early to Rustwood that year. The snow melted quickly, leaving behind patches of wild clover and fresh shoots of grass along the fence lines. Birds returned to the cottonwoods, and the air smelled like earth, clean and new. Life, once hushed by winter and grief, began to stir again. At the edge of town, Carter's land had changed. What used to be a forgotten corner lot behind a worn-down cabin was now something more. Fences repainted, paths cleared, flower beds dug along the barn's edge. And right in the center stood the stall that Ava had helped build. No longer just a shelter, it had become a symbol. They called it the Blaze Project. It started small. One rescued horse, one quiet girl, one man who carried more sorrow than he spoke of. But after the town meeting, after Ava's letter had been printed and shared across the country, things started to grow. Dr. Dawson offered to volunteer twice a week. A retired carpenter came by to help build more stalls. Parents began bringing their kids, not just the ones who loved animals, but the ones who had stopped speaking, the ones who flinched when doors slammed, the ones who were too used to being ignored. And Blaze, scarred, limping, steady Blaze, was there for all of them. He would stand quietly while a child placed a trembling hand on his neck. He would lower his head beside a wheelchair, nuzzling a sleeve until laughter broke through. He became a living reminder that broken didn't mean done. It just meant healing looked different now. Ava didn't want to be called brave. She didn't want to be interviewed again. She just wanted to draw, so she did. Her sketches lined the barn walls. Portraits of Blaze, of rescued horses, of kids sitting in the grass with shy smiles. One drawing showed a little girl curled against a horse's chest under a tree, stars overhead. In the sky above them, a soft outline of a woman. Her mother watched over them. She pinned that one above Blaze's stall. The school changed too. Rustwood Elementary added a counselor full-time. They introduced a new program called Voices That Matter, a space where kids could speak without fear of being silenced. Ms. Bellamy helped lead it. She said Ava taught her more about courage in a month than any training in 20 years. Letters came in from other towns. Schools wanted to replicate the project. Carter started receiving messages from veterans, teachers, single parents, all saying the same thing. We saw what you built. We want to do the same. One morning, they found a small package at the barn gate. No note, just a hand-carved wooden plaque that read, "For those who stood when others froze." Carter hung it above the entrance. 3 weeks after Blaze returned home, Ava stood beside him in the round pen as kids gathered for the first open day at the project. Some were nervous, others just curious. A boy with a burn scar down his arm asked if Blaze could still run. "Not far," Ava answered, brushing her hand through his mane. "But he's faster than most when it counts." The boy smiled. A little girl in overalls came closer, whispering, "Does he remember what happened to him?" Ava thought for a second. "He remembers how it felt, but he doesn't live there anymore." The girl nodded, then reached out to touch Blaze's shoulder. Behind them, Carter watched from the fence, arms crossed, eyes proud. He didn't speak often during events. He just made sure everything worked. The ramps were stable, the kids felt safe, the horses were calm. He didn't need credit. He just needed to see them heal. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, Ava and Carter sat by the barn. Blaze lay nearby in the grass, legs tucked under, eyes half closed. His ears twitched every now and then, as if listening for something far away. "I've been thinking," Ava said, setting down her sketchbook. "Dangerous habit," Carter teased gently. She grinned. "I want to write a book, not just drawings, real pages, about Blaze, about all of this." Carter nodded slowly. "Then you should. You'll help me?" "With the spelling," he said. "Not the truth. You already know how to tell that better than anyone." A long silence settled between them, but it was the comfortable kind, the kind that didn't need filling. After a while, Ava spoke again. "I used to think no one would ever come for me," she said softly. "Not when it mattered." Carter looked over. "And now?" She turned to Blaze, who lifted his head at the sound of her voice. "Now I know they did." She stood and walked toward her horse, barefoot in the grass, curls dancing in the breeze. Blaze rose slowly to his feet, the way he always did now, deliberate, careful, but once upright, he was solid. She slipped an arm around his neck, and they walked together toward the ridge as the sky turned lavender above them. Behind them, the barn lights flicked on, and somewhere in the fields beyond, the wind carried a whisper only the horses could hear.